All right, let's jump in. I got a bunch of questions.
Okay,
If someone has actually never seen anything you've written, produced, or directed, what's the first thing you want them watching and why?
wow, Steve, you come straight in hard with the good stuff. I really missed you. I haven't seen you in a long time. Feels like a long time. Gosh. I mean, obviously I want to say the 355 because I'm promoting that movie right now, but I think the movie that most expresses me as a person, God, I have a lot of answers for this. I'm going to give you two answers, okay? The movie that most expresses me as a person is X-Men Days of Future Past. And the reason for that is I love comic books, as you know. I love the X-Men, as you know. I grew up loving those books. It was in many ways the most complex, in every way, the most complex script to write I've ever written because of the time travel and all of the time paradoxes and all of that. And also, then this is the part that might be surprising, and maybe we've spoken about this before, it was the most personal movie I've ever written. It was a time in my life, I'd just gotten divorced, where what Professor Xavier was going through in that movie, a man who needed to find hope again, was what I was going through as a man who needed to find hope again. And hope is something that's really important and I think plays through a lot of my films and a lot of my work, the importance of it and the value of it, and the power of it. And ultimately, Days of Future Past is about the power of hope. And so I would say that film thematically most expresses me. The other answer I guess I would give you is Mr. and Mrs. Smith, because I think people see a lot of my work, and maybe Deadpool expresses this, but they perhaps think of me as a more serious human being than I actually am. And I'm a fun, playful, silly guy, as you know, as a friend. And I think Mr. and Mrs. Smith has a tone. I wrote it when I was really young. I was in film school, and I kind of wrote it really free. And it, it's a long time ago, and I've evolved since then, and I have 4 kids since then, and the world has changed. But there is a playfulness to that film and a sort of friskiness to that film that I think is also me. I'm not telling you what I think are the best films I've ever worked on. I think some people would argue The Martian's the best film I've ever worked on, or Logan, but those are the films I think best express me.
Sure, and I think those. Look, there's no right answer here. It's just what do you think of all the films you've worked on? Which went through the most changes in the editing room, and why?
Of all the films I worked on, the film that went through the most changes in the editing room, honestly, is probably Fantastic Four.
I was just going to ask you, and was it Fantastic Four?
Yeah, I think it was Fantastic Four because we really struggled with the tone of that film, and so I think finding, one of the things you do in the edit room, other than obviously just put the movie together and hope that for the best, is when the tone is inconsistent for various reasons, and the tones are often inconsistent. Mr. and Mrs. Smith went through a lot of edit in the edit, and Deadpool went through a fair amount in the edit, the first Deadpool. But Fantastic Four was one where Josh Trank had a very specific vision for the film. I don't know that it was the same vision as the studio. And I think that that them butting it, which is not, this is not going to be a surprise to anyone. This is common knowledge. And Josh would say the same thing. I think that struggle between the two of them yielded a lot of work in the edit. And back and forth in the edit.
Which you've obviously produced a ton of movies. What film ended up testing? What was your highest test scoring film? I'm curious about that, or something like 1 or 2 of the highest scoring test films.
Deadpool 1 and 2.
Oh, both of those.
Both of them. I can't remember which one tested higher. I mean, what's interesting about Deadpool 1 is it just it was one of those films, and this is really a testament to Ryan and Tim. I mean, and to Paul and Rhett, the writers, but to Ryan Reynolds and Tim Miller, is that it just kept testing higher and higher and higher in post as they kept doing more and more work. And we did something like only a few days of reshoots on that film, and the reshoots shot it up like, I don't remember how many points, but it tested extraordinarily. And I've tested, Sherlock Holmes tested incredibly high. Mr. and Mrs. Smith tested really, really high. The Martian tested insanely high with very few revisions after the first test. I'm trying to, this movie tested high, 355. But Deadpool was one where I can't remember if it was one or two, where it was like 99 with a 90% definite recommend. It was numbers that the studio had never seen before. It might have been Deadpool 1. Again, I've been through so many test screenings because each movie sometimes can go through 10 test screenings.
Sure.
That it's hard for me to remember, but I know those Deadpool movies tested wildly high. In fact, the second Deadpool movie tested so high that we then left Los Angeles and went to Texas to test it in Texas, thinking that somehow we were getting, inflated scores in LA by cinephiles. And we wanted to go somewhere that was kind of more like a mall in the South or Middle America. And we went to Texas, and it scored, I think, even higher. And I remember we all went to dinner. Our plane broke down, and we couldn't leave. And we had a lovely night in outside of Dallas somewhere.
I also remember that we screened, as part of the Collider screening series, Deadpool like 8 days before it came out. When Fox and everyone was hoping for like a $20 million weekend, and little did anyone know, that what was going to end up happening.
It came out. I remember it really vividly because it was Valentine's Day that weekend that it came out, the first one. And I had no plans. We were making Days of Future Past at the time, I believe, or maybe Apocalypse. We were making an X-Men movie. And Jennifer Lawrence was flying to New York from Montreal for the weekend. And I had no plans and no significant other. And, but I was like, I just want to go to New York and party for the weekend. And I'm going to be really honest. I think I'm doing the reshoots for Days of Future Past. I can't remember, because if it was wintertime, it was a reshoot in Montreal. And I remember I partied a little too hard on Valentine's Day, just drinking, which I barely ever do. Drinking even, I mean. And I'm just a clumsy Jew, and I fell down and I gave myself a black eye by falling down, and I had to show up on set on that Monday or Tuesday with a black eye, having gone to New York and been like, yeah, I get it. I partied too hard, blame Deadpool. None of us ever saw this coming. I got smacked in the face by this historic release.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that it's just a great story. And the fact of all the obstacles that movie had to battle to actually get into a movie theater, I'm hoping that, Marvel does something with the character. I'm hoping that there's a Deadpool 3 at some point, but who knows? So jumping into the 355. So was it, I'm going to give you a little shit for a second, but it's also loving. So I love the movie Sneakers, and the MacGuffin in this is very similar to Sneakers. Was that like an homage? How did that end up happening?
I love Sneakers too. I think maybe I'm a little older than you, but it came out at a time when I was like, to me, Sneakers is like the grown-up Goonies. It's somehow like, it's a time where you're like, oh, I'm a grown-up now. And I like these grown-up movies with these grown-up actors. And I really like it. And I think it's undervalued. I don't know that it was a conscious homage. It's something I was aware of. But I also think it's something that, to some extent, in one form or another, we've seen MacGuffins like it. One of the things I love about MacGuffins is that ultimately they don't matter. I loved what JJ did in Mission Impossible 3, where the MacGuffin is just the rabbit's foot, and you never know what it is. It's just the MacGuffin. You know, and the Maltese Falcon does something really radical with the notion of the Falcon, and you know, in that movie. So I was more interested in this one. We all were, in the characters, and in this ensemble of sort of characters coming together, because it's very rare in spy movies, really rare, weirdly rare, that you have ensemble spy movies. You have Bond and Bourne and Kingsman and the whole list, but you know, the last ensemble spy movie I can think of is Ronin, and which is a movie I really like. And so I was just really interested in these characters, and Jessica was too, is Jessica's idea from the beginning. These characters coming together, who happen to be female, these characters coming together from different countries with different agendas and having to form a team. And you know, you and I both love team superhero movies, and I've worked on team superhero movies, and this was a team spy movie.
Yeah, I'm only giving you shit about the MacGuffin.
I get it.
I agree with you. The MacGuffin really doesn't matter. It could just be a pen. You know, it's just what's driving the plot forward. You know, you got to film in Paris and all over the UK, and you got to do this basically talk a little bit about how you decided on where you wanted the film to take place. And also the one thing that I took away from the Paris stuff is you shot in locations that you typically don't see in movies, like the Paris Underground, on those train tracks. Can you sort of talk about all that?
Yeah, I mean, we really wanted the movie to be global, both in terms of the cast and in terms of the locations. And we shot as many places as we could. Obviously, the cast is global. We have German and Spanish and British African. We have American. We have Chinese. So, you know, we started in Paris. And it's rare and an incredible privilege, especially on a movie that doesn't have a massive budget, to be able to shoot Paris for Paris. And we shot in places that I never, ever thought, especially with the sort of preconceptions of Paris and the French, they would let us shoot. And so, yes, they let us shoot in the Paris Underground, down in the tracks, which was scary because there were real third rails and places that you could not go or you would be electrocuted to death, which is not fun to shoot with a big crew. And there were certain amounts of people that were allowed in at different times and all that. And so it was very, you know, it was done as safely as possible, and luckily, obviously, totally safe. But what was really fun was, and I think this might have been our first day, we shot in, they told us the oldest, I'm going to assume it's at least one of the oldest, arcades, like indoor malls in Paris. And we ran Diane Kruger on a motorcycle and Jessica running and pushing through crowds of extras through the arcade and destroyed stuff in the arcade. That was really fun. We created a rig to be able to shoot it and be in front of and back of the, in this narrow space, to be in front and back of the motorcycle with the camera. And so, yeah, we shot in the streets. We shot a bridge down in Paris and shot Sebastian chasing Edgar Ramirez. And just, it's nice listen, man, like, it's incredible being in Paris, you know. And then being able to be there for 3-4 weeks and shoot. The weeks before that prepping was a dream. And then the rest of it was mostly the UK. We shot a little bit in Morocco. We built some Morocco in the UK, and we shot all over London. Mostly locations. Even if it was an interior, instead of building it on a stage, we did it as a location. Just because. Or we built into a location, you know, and we liked the idea of being, again, kind of down and dirty and gritty and in the streets, and feeling like we weren't stage bound, which can give, I think, the characters or the actors and actresses a feeling of things being fake.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why the James Bond movies are the James Bond movies is they're filming on location. You can't. You know, the location is anyway, it just adds so much realism. Talk a little bit about you worked with your DP, Tim, on the aesthetic of the film, how you wanted it to look. I mean, I noticed a lot of handheld camera. Can you sort of talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, Tim Rees-Jones is he worked on the early Guy Ritchie movies, and he's a big music video director and commercial music video cinematographer and commercial cinematographer. And I really liked his work because it's so kinetic. And that's the word that we kept using throughout the movie. And I think it's the aesthetic he brought to the film. And we have handheld in pretty much every scene. We have it throughout the action, but we also have it in dialogue scenes, so that nothing feels too static and staged, and too much of like a proscenium, like you're watching a play. It just feels like it's moving the way that life moves, right? Like when you're in a room with somebody, you're not static ever. You and I are right now because we're sitting in chairs doing this interview, but when we get up from these interviews, we're going to go downstairs or outside or whatever. And we wanted the camera to rove that way. In fact, there's not even that much Steadicam. It's almost entirely handheld. And it's also, what's nice about a handheld is it gives you lots of surprises because it's inexact, right? Like nothing's precise, totally precise about the frame when it's handheld. It's kind of roving around and finding things, and the corners of frames become surprising. And not locked off. There's a sort of imbalance to it slightly as well, which I wanted the movie to have, so that it didn't feel like it was too, again, static. So yeah.
This is a little bit of a jokey thing, but you have basically an all women cast.
Yes.
And so, most spy movies, like Bond movies, it's all men and you have the Bond girl. So how did you decide on Sebastian Stan being the Bond guy, if you will?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we joked about Sebastian and Edgar Ramirez being the Bond boys.
Exactly.
We chose them because they're obviously great actors. Two, they're great looking guys, the way that you would choose a Bond boy. But also because they're friends. Sebastian became a friend with Jessica's and mine from The Martian. They worked together. Obviously, they were in the crew of the ship in The Martian. And he's an extraordinary actor and a lovely guy, and I'm a big fan. There was no audition. We met for breakfast in New York. He read the script. He liked it. He was in. Edgar is a really close friend of Jessica's and then became a really close friend of mine once we made the movie. He's really close with Penelope as well, whom we'd already cast. And we sent him the script. He liked it and he was in. Again, an incredible actor and, a not bad looking guy. I will say it's funny. I do talk about this movie and I'm like, it's down and dirty and gritty and real. And then it's like, and also the spies are all gorgeous. So there is that element of it that is a movie reality where the male and female spies all happen to be, the most beautiful people in the world.
I love talking about the editing room because it's ultimately where everything comes together. So with this film specifically, did you have a much longer cut? How did it get shaped in the editing room?
I never had a much longer cut. I had a few scenes that we cut. So it wasn't like I went in and trimmed the hell out of existing scenes. It was more like, do we need this scene? Is it slowing down the momentum of the movie? And, the way this movie was put together and made, we really had I had unbelievable creative freedom. It was essentially an independent movie. We sold it at the Cannes Film Festival. Universal were our partners in UK and US, but it was ours. And so it wasn't like I was given notes, but it wasn't like anything was a dictate. And I worked with Lee Smith, who you know well, and is, arguably one of, if not the, not arguably, inarguably one of, arguably the best editor in the world.
He's kind of good.
Yeah, I mean, he did a pretty good job with all the Chris Nolan movies.
He's kind of good.
Yeah, and I think he won one Oscar. I think because of Inception deserves two. He's just the best, and he's just a great guy. And we've worked together a few. I think our third movie together in some form. And he's just so good at like pinpointing moments that could take longer, actually, that could breathe, going in the opposite direction. And then he's really good at being like, you don't need this scene, or you think this scene is ending here, but this scene is really already over. And I really treat Lee the same way I would treat the actors and actresses, which is a real partner, and it's like a real collaboration. And I'm all too eager to have their ideas be better than my ideas.
Well, I mean, I've always heard about Spielberg. It's always the best idea in the room wins, and it's still his name on the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, listen, the way that, this extends to studio notes. I know there's a lot of, filmmakers who hate studio notes or hate, test screenings. And I'm like, these are all free ideas. These are free ideas that you can do with what you want, and they can spark better ideas. They can be rejected. They can be embraced, but who's not going to take a free idea?
I think what the with this movie, you had creative freedom, but I think sometimes what people rebel against, and this is just me speaking, is when a filmmaker, it's like their first or second movie doesn't have as much creative clout, and the studio is saying, we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
And then, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think there's a way, yes, I totally know what you mean. I think there's a way to be as creative with notes as you are when you're by yourself facing a blank page. And if you're not, and you're shut down to notes, then you are going to get into a battle with the studio or with a partner or with an actor or actress. But if you're open, more times than not, if you feel really strongly or passionately that the note is not right, you will be able to work your way or talk your way through it more often than not. I'm not saying it always happens. Sure. I do think that I think there's an attitude, an approach to taking notes that is creative rather than just, professional.
What do you actually think, for soon-to-be fans of the movie, what do you think they actually would be surprised to learn about the actual making of the film?
Maybe they'd be surprised to learn how much of the stunts the women did themselves, just because I think we're used to movie stars not doing their own stunts. And it was really important for Jessica specifically. Jessica and Diane do the majority of the stunts in the movie, to do their own stunts and to do all their own fighting. Jessica's in that scene where she's outside the fish market, and she's on that beam 50 feet above the ground and jumping onto a shipping container on a ship. That's all Jess, in heels. And so maybe that would be the thing that would surprise people, just because maybe we're used to assuming, again, especially on a movie like this, assuming that there are stunt people, and there were stunt people, but that there were stunt people doing the majority of the stunts. And in fact, it was the actors, the actresses.
Jessica's obviously a producer on the movie.
Yeah.
At any point was she like, as the producer, does my character need to wear heels in this scene?
She had plenty of ideas. I mean, all the actresses and actors had ideas. She never like pulled the producer card on me or on anybody else, but was an incredibly involved producer. So, again, this was her idea.
Sure.
And I was really respectful of that as somebody who's had original ideas before. So like, I wanted to honor her being the originator of the idea. But yeah, no, she didn't have notes about the heels. I will say that there were a few costumes or outfits that came from her imagination, but that was true for all of the actors and actresses. Specifically, the cream suit in Morocco was something that she was passionate about, I think, until she realized that linen in a hot environment is actually not as good as you think it's going to be. It wrinkles pretty easily, and in between each take takes a lot of time. But yeah, no, she's a pleasure to work with, and she's like a really, really close friend. Our families are friends. She really is one of my closest friends. I adore her, and she was great, and she was great the whole way, and really industrious. And her producing partner Kelly Carmichael was really involved, and we were all a team making this movie. And when I say we, I mean myself, them, and the actors, main actors and actresses.
Before I run out of time, you produce, I'm going to say a lot of things. I'm going to use it like that. And so while I have you, I do want to ask you a few other things. Sure. First, congrats on Invasion getting a second season. but because I have such little time, I just want to start with that. What is the story with The Running Man and that remake? Is that moving forward? Is that something that I might be seeing soon?
It is moving forward. Edgar Wright is attached to co-write and direct the movie, co-write with Michael Bacall. And I sure hope it's something you're seeing soon. That part's not up to me, but it's something that they're working on.
I believe you're producing something with Andrew Stanton directing. What is, and it's Chairman Spaceman.
Chairman Spaceman at Searchlight. And we have a great script. And Andrew is doing a final tinker on the script, and then we'll be going out to actors.
Oh, okay. So it's like the script is pretty good.
It's really good.
Yeah, I heard Andrew's pretty good as a director.
Yeah, he's really good as a director, and I've been a huge fan of the Pixar movies, and he's brought a lot of the Pixar process to the storytelling of the script, and it's extraordinary to watch because he is a real master of storytelling.
Rather than me actually, I have one other thing for you that I want to ask specifically. So what's up with Battlestar Galactica? Because I heard about it for a while, and then I know that there's the movie, and I know Sam is working on a series, and like what can you tell fans?
I can tell fans that I'm done with the second draft of the script, and we are in the process of going out to directors. And the hope is to attach a director and start prepping the movie this year. It's a Megillah, humongous film, and the prep will be a very long prep period. So I would imagine even if we attach a director today, it would take 6-9 months to prep this movie properly. So at the earliest, we'd be shooting at the end of this year. We'd probably be shooting at the beginning of next year. Time will tell who the director is, and then you or someone else will tell who the director is. In terms of the situation with Sam and the show, I can't say too much about it other than there is synergy between the two enterprises, and constant communication between us. We've become close and been having a really good time together. And there will be, for lack of a better phrase, and it's an overused phrase, a shared universe.
I understand. I have to add, listen, I love Battlestar Galactica, and I'm incredibly excited that you guys are developing something. So for fans of the series that was on a decade ago or whatever, does it connect to that, or is this like a completely new thing?
Gosh, you're asking me a hard question that I'm not sure I'm allowed to answer. There are connections, but it is certainly not simply a continuation or a remake of Ron Moore's masterpiece.
Got it. I'm given the wrap-up signal, so I will just say that when you can tell me more, I would love to know more. And I'm very excited for that. And look, man, I wish you nothing but the best, and congrats on the movie. And,
Yeah, it's great to see you. I miss you. I miss your black fingernails.